Hi everyone, it's Megan, the sales director at Control Bionics. I had received a bunch of requests recently to jump on here and give you a quick overview and tutorial of the NeuroNode Controller app. Essentially, we review this at implementation and setup and during the device evaluation, but just as a little refresher, when you are seeing your client alone and you're feeling overwhelmed about what I told you and if you can actually remember everything. So here is a quick tutorial. We're going to assume that the device is already connected to your client. So set up, put on that muscle map either by the electrodes or by the NeuroNode with the little paper wafer itself. And then we're going to go into this gray app at the very top, the triangle and the two ends, NeuroNode, and into this NeuroNode Controller app. And so when you see this, you'll just actually be able to say connect to your NeuroNode, and it should connect fairly quickly. You'll see a couple of those movements right away just as the graph is getting started. But what we're looking at here is just that blue line is the actual signal that the patient is putting off. So mine is currently around 5 or 10 of the resting. Yours may be higher or lower. You're just kind of looking for more of that flat line graph, right? So now the next thing that we're going to look at is talking to the patient about making their movement. So if they make their movement, you should see a nice peak coming up and down. So we're just going to ask them a couple of times, just looking at that blue line, just disregard the green or the orange, yellow, amber, whatever you call that second line, but just asking the client to kind of make the movement and then come back to rest. You may give them a little bit of time. You may be kind of talking to the family at this point, kind of giving the client time to kind of get adjusted to the movement that it takes. Their line may be higher than mine or lower than mine. We're just trying to see that clear difference in that tall peak versus the resting point. And once I get a good idea, like that's the good movement, I might say a couple of times, like I want you to make the movement twice and then rest. So once, twice, and rest again. Perfect. So those are the kind of things I'm looking for. Then they'll say again, just kind of looking, and again. So now I see that they have a nice line, a nice rest. Everything looks like it's going well. And now I'm going to start to go into those settings again and kind of look at that green line and that amber line, because the green line is ultimately the switch access. That's what's going to, once you get above that green line, that's what's going to activate the switch. And the yellow line is that rest, so that we know they need to come below that yellow line in order for the switch to make another movement. So both of those lines are flexible. In our calibrating, we're just kind of looking at those blue lines and kind of taking a look at the movement overall and when they make their movement. So I'm going to go to the very bottom row. You'll see 5 circles, and I'm going to choose the very middle one. It's like a cog and wheel. And that's going to bring me to the menu. I'm just going to lift this up a little bit, maybe, so you can see it. It's not really liking me. Probably have too much going on. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll down to where you see that static scaling and that green and that yellow or amber or orange, whatever you call that. Those colors correspond with the graph on the other side. So now I'm going to just kind of look at my movements and see that when they make that movement, they can get above the green line easily and below that yellow line. So I'm going much higher than the green line when I make my movement. So I could raise or lower that green line. Don't want it to be too much effort, but I definitely want it to be intentional. And then that amber or yellow line could come down to just above my rest. So I could probably go back into the settings and drop this line down. I said I was like at a 5 or a 10, so I'm just going to drop it down to say 15, just to make sure that I'm still well below it. You're going to hit OK and come out of that. So I'm still well below. Now I'm feeling like I'm much higher. So I'm gonna drop right down to what we know was our good rest that we were seeing before. So you'll just see slowly but surely dropping down, getting to what is a comfortable rest. So I had put mine at 15. I'm maybe going to bump it up so that I'm comfortably resting below that. So I'm going down a little bit lower, but I just want to make sure that I feel like I'm comfortably resting here. Was a little bit higher, and you can see some of those peaks going up above that yellow. So I may raise that yellow line and maybe bump it up to, say, 21. And we'll look at it again. Great. So I feel like I'm resting comfortably below that yellow line. And when I make my movement, I'm going comfortably above that green line. So you can look right there at that last movement. And while I have two peaks, I never all the way came below the yellow. So since I never came back to rest in between, it's still only one hit. You have to go above the green and back below the yellow. So for me, that worked great. It was still just one hit. And you can see towards the end of the screen, I'm going up again, but I'm not high enough to go to that green, so I'm not necessarily making a selection. If that's just my rest or part of like a twitch that would come on, that's totally fine. It's not affecting my device at all. So now I'm excited. I've been working with this switch for a minute, feeling really comfortable. And I can make my movement again. Now you can see a little bit more excitement, so I keep on crawling up, not really doing anything differently. There was my movement. But I've got to come below that yellow line. So if somebody stays above that yellow line for too long, I mean, you can see that I'm slowly moving down. So maybe I'm calming down, I'm not listening, or maybe I'm just getting back to that place of comfort, still below that yellow line. That's great. This is going to take a little bit of time, a little bit of muscle memory. And there I did consistently come down, feel comfortable. Get back below that yellow just a little bit before the last time, right? So every time getting a little bit easier. Perfect. So if you felt like you needed to raise that yellow line up a little bit because I'm still pretty close to it, or maybe occasionally going over it, that's fine too. You can go back into those settings and raise that yellow line. Feel like you're more comfortably resting right below where you need to. Great. So if we go back into these settings, we talked about the green and the yellow, which are definitely the switch functions. You can also go scroll up to the top again, and you have that audio signal. That is that beep that you often hear on the device when you go above the green line. So there was my beep. So every time you do a beep, that is the switch activating. So if you feel like you're hearing a couple of beeps, we did the last time. I'll see if I can make that happen again. There you go, 2 beeps in a row. That could sometimes be just an involuntary movement or picking it up twice. Once when for me, I'm using my thumb. So when I bring it up and then when I bring it back down, it could be picking up both movements. So if it happens consistently, I could go in and rule out a switch repeat by saying ignore switch repeats for say 1 or 2 tenths of a second after the first movement. Sometimes this might be something that you need to put on initially as they're kind of learning this movement and getting more comfortable with that muscle movement. And then over time, they've refined their movement. And so you might not need it anymore. But you can definitely play around with that just looking at the signal itself. So now I've sort of refined my signal. I'm coming back down. I'm feeling way more comfortable. I've done this for a little while now and making some nice clean peaks. When I want to make my movement, I am. And that's what will translate into the selection on the device. If they're getting ready for transfer, you can look down at the bottom and hit that very last circle, the pause button, and that will essentially just pause the neuronodes so they could transfer, not make any hits, rest, any of those things, and not worry about the device at this moment. Set them back down in their wheelchair or move them back from their bed, and then press play again, and we're back at it. Nothing has come on and off the person. We're just pausing the app during those moments. So this, again, is just a brief overview of the controller app and just the very small things that you need to know when setting up your client. Once you have the right parameters set and you feel like you're comfortable with their switching, you can press the second button from the left. It's the cog and wheel with the down arrow, and that just saves their settings. So now as we take it on and off, when I take this off for the evening, go to bed, wake up in the morning and put it back, these are my same switch settings every time. I hope you guys found this useful. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email me at mikoeneman@controlbionics.com or give me a call at 513-429-0781. Thank you.